So the last lecture for week 9 is the Git Undo lecture. This is a fun little lecture where we show you how to manipulate Git history, which is something you've probably all been tempted to do but never done. So sometimes we make mistakes in Git. I'm sure some of you have made some mistakes so far. I'm sure some of you have done something with Git. You've made a commit that you go, I wish I could go back in time and fix that up or change that happened. And we need methods to resolve these mistakes sometimes. And the three things we're going to be looking at are we're going to be looking at doing a hard reset to a point in time. We're going to be looking at altering the Git history, and we're going to be looking at amending a commit. Everything we've done until this point continues to build on Git history, right? We've talked about Git history like it's completely immutable, like it's like a blockchain. I hate the word. You know what I mean? Like it's stuck, and you can't undo it. If you want to make a fix, you go and make a new commit. But we're going to be looking at a couple things. Firstly, Git Reset. Atlassian has a great article about this, though we're going to look at two particular types of Git Reset. The first one is Git Reset Hard, and what Git Reset Hard does, and I'll show you this by, let's go and have a look at let's go down memory lane and go find an old lecture code we had. So here we've got lecture 2.1. That doesn't have enough commits on it. Lecture 1 test. I can't remember which lecture has commits. This has plenty of commits on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and clone this particular repo. I'm going to open up terminal. You don't really need VLab for this. I'm just going to use my local terminal. Is that going to be visible? Yeah, seems okay. Git clone. I'm going to clone the repo. I'm going to delete the repo. Clone it again. And here's the thing. If you go to git log... If you go to git log, you'll see all the commits here, right? You've got the last commit and a whole list down here. And sometimes what you want to do is you want to be able to go back to a previous commit and kind of like, it's like going back in time. It's like literal time travel. So let me mute the damn computer. So let's say I want to go back to added a silly name. So what you can actually do here to go back to that commit is if you type in git reset -- hard, then you put the hash of that commit there. So let's try that. I'm going to type that into terminal, git reset -- hard, and then I'm going to go and get the commit hash like this. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it here. And I'm going to hit enter. And what that does is that actually resets your Git history. It resets where, technically what it does is it resets where your branch is pointing to. So it's not like it removes commits. I don't want to leave the impression for you that it removes commits, but what it does is it kind of changes where the branch is pointing to. Because if you remember back to our first lecture, we learned that every time you commit, you create a commit and then your branch now points there. And a branch is simply a pointer to a commit. So by git resetting hard, we're making the branch point to a different commit. And you can see that here if I git log now, you'll see the top commit is added a silly name. Whereas previously at the top of the log here, these two commits existed. So I don't want to say we deleted those two commits. What I want to say is that we kind of ignored them. So your branch is now pointing to this, and your branch has no awareness that the other commits existed. You know, it's kind of like the equivalent of only being able to see so far into the distance, and you just take a few steps back, and now that stuff you can't see anymore. It doesn't mean it died necessarily, but it's not visible anymore. So as far as you're concerned, it's not there. Now, if I go and try and now push this to GitLab, the problem here is that GitLab is very, very good at basically saying, I can't do what you want because you telling me to push those commits, you telling me to push the branch master, which has like a pointer to the silly name commit, you're basically like telling me to override what's in GitLab because GitLab has some extra commits. And the only way you can actually do one of these pushes is with a force. And generally speaking, in this course, you won't be able to do that because of the restrictions of GitLab that we put on your repos. And most repos have a protected master branch or protected main branch. I can remove that because I have special powers. You pretty much can't remove that. You can imagine how bad this would be if we actually let you use this. But the point is that you can do this for your own projects that you make on GitLab and stuff. So, you know, you can push that up. And now when we go to GitLab, if you remember the commits before, you'll notice these two commits just now vanish. They're gone. So we kind of made them disappear in a sense because we changed what master was pointing to. So we reset what master was pointing to a particular commit. You don't have to do a force push if you do some things locally. So for instance, let's say that I go into food and add a line A, and then I git commit, added food. Then I go back in food and add B, and then I go and make another commit, added food. Then I go and add C and I make another commit, added food. Now I've got 3 more commits here. But let's say I want to jump back to this commit, git reset hard that. You'll now see that in my file, it only has A. So I have actually jumped back. And you'll notice in this case, when I push to GitLab, I don't need to force it. And that's because GitLab did not have an awareness of those other commits I made. So it's not that every time you push, it's not that every time you reset hard, you need to push force. It's that every time you reset hard and GitLab, and you're kind of rewriting history to GitLab, you need to force. But if you're just rewriting history that's only occurred locally since the last commit GitLab's been aware of, you can do what you want. I honestly have never done it locally like that. Pretty much all instances I've ever dealt with. We do this all the time for your labs and stuff, whilst they're in development and whatnot. But yeah, to the point here, this is used for saying I want to go back in time and I don't care about anything that's happened since the point I'm going back to. That's the use of this particular one. Git Reset Soft is a little bit different though, and I think this one's a bit more confusing. What this one is saying is that I like the code I have, and I don't want to change any of the code I have, but I want to pretend that we're at a different commit. And this one is a little bit harder to explain, so let me try and show you. So let's imagine for a second that I'm adding all these different, I'm going to write, added food B. Then I'm going to add food C. Then I'm going to add food D. I'm going to add food E, right? Like this. I've added like 5 pieces of food now. Now my git log looks like this. Now what happens if I want to keep all that stuff in the file, but I look at my git history and I think, God, all those commits are really terrible. What horrible names. And this is going to be so confusing and for someone to read. So what I can actually do is I can actually say, I want to go back to the commit before I added all that food, but it's not that I want to go back to it and change all the files. I don't want to go back in time. I want to keep all my files, but I want Git to think that I'm at that commit. It's kind of like the equivalent of removing the commits but keeping the files. So imagine the hard reset is like removing the files and the commits, whereas this one is like removing the commits but keeping the files. So if I do a Git Reset Soft here, and I go git log, you'll notice that all of those commits are gone, and you'll notice that if I open food, there's 5 lines there, and when I go to git status, it is telling me that I've modified food, right? So now what I can do is I can commit and saying, adding food A, B, C, D, E, and now when I git log, you'll see that there's just 1 commit for that. And now when I push that up to GitLab, you can see that I've gone and did I push some, what did I do? Did I push some stuff? Did I push added food? Yeah, okay. In this case, I have to force because GitLab has different understanding of what happened. So there's my added food A, B, C, D, and it's all wrapped up in 1 commit now. Now, I'll be honest, I've rarely had a use for this in the workplace as much as I have with the reset hard, but where I actually use this most commonly, and frankly 90% of what I use this for, is for your labs and stuff. When we write your labs in this course, there's so much commit history, right? Like we work on it for like days, and there's commit, different people, merge requests, this. Like think about your major project, right? So with your major project, there's many commits that the staff do. We don't just make 1 commit, but what we actually do is just before we release it to you, I come in and I do a Git Reset Soft to a really old commit. Look at that one, September 6, 2020. That's a long time ago. That's not that this was ready for you in 2020. It's that the very first commit I ever made in GitLab for the project backend, which is a new project, sort of, was in September 6th of 20. Oh god, it's a long time ago. And we Git Reset soft that before the course starts, so that you don't have to look at all of our kind of diffs and changes and all these other kinds of things. But we want you to have all the files, you know. So it's like great when you want to like work on stuff, but then kind of clean up the Git history. Damn it. So, you know, I like the code I have. Let's not change anything, but I want to alter the chemistry that got me here. And then the last one, and something that I think is underutilized generally, is the Git Commit Amend. And what this one is this one allows you to change your commit message. So let's imagine that I made that commit. Write this and I think, oh, that's an ugly looking commit, isn't it? A, comma, B, space, comma, C, space, comma, comma, space, D, comma, space, E, right? So now what I can do is I can actually go git commit M and like write it better, adding food A, B, C, D, and E. But if I try and commit this now, obviously it's going to be like, you have nothing to commit because you haven't done anything. But if I add the -- amend flag to the end, what it will do is it will not try and commit new files. It will actually kind of like recommit the previous ones. So you see here the name is adding food that, and when I run that, if I git log again, you'll see that it now is kind of been cleaned up. So it's a great way to kind of change the name of your last commit really easily. One thing to be conscious of though, and this is really important, even though it changes the name, it's not like it just changes the name. Have a look at this. It changes the git hashes too. So the original commit we did was E868, whereas when I did the git amend, it's 99F8. So it's not the same commit with a different name. It's kind of like what GitLab. It's like what Git does is it like removes the commit and makes a new commit in its place, which is a different hash, a different whatever. Though it does keep the time the same. That is why you see stuff like on GitLab here that the time is the same, even though this will be a different commit to the one that used to be. And that actually makes sense because like if you're changing the name of something, it should probably be a different commit. Otherwise it could be very, very confusing. Though, like always, the problem with changing the name is that GitLab has a different sense of what that commit should be, because on GitLab it thinks it should be commit E86, and you've kind of gotten rid of that commit in your own history here. So similarly, you need to do another git push force. And you'll see here, if I go back to GitLab, you'll notice the commit hash over here. Watch this as I refresh. That will update, and then the name will update too. So now it's 99F8 there. So that's just a fun little nugget. That's actually everything to run through in this lecture. It's meant to be quite light and simple and just kind of practical. We don't teach this to you early on because, frankly, most of you don't understand enough of Git for it to make a lot of sense. There's no reason for you to use it in the course because we don't want you resetting stuff. You know, it's just learning. You know, and you can't mostly. You can't really use reset very much anyway. So, but we like to do it later on because it's nice, useful knowledge, and it's interesting, and it's a nice way to kind of start winding down the term with little nuggets and tidbits and stuff. Yeah. That's it for today. If you could pause the video, click on the form on the slides, whatever works for you, fill in the feedback, that would be great. I'd really love it and appreciate it. If you have any questions about this, you can ask them now. That would be good too. Thank you.